Mr. President, distinguished guests, search and rescue partners, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Again, my name is Rick Button, and I work in the Office of Search and Rescue at the United States Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. We work with the International Maritime Organization, International Civil Aviation Organization, other nations and regions of the world concerning implementation of the global search and rescue system, and also within the U.S. concerning the U.S. national search and rescue system. Working with other nations and within the U.S. to improve how we can save the lives of people in distress is very challenging, but also incredibly rewarding, as any of my search and rescue colleagues here today can attest to. I want to thank you for coming to this search and rescue panel this morning, and very much appreciate the Assembly of the Arctic Circle hosting this discussion. Search and rescue is a critically important issue and takes on an even greater significance in the Arctic, one of the most hazardous environments on the earth. So when I discuss search and rescue, I look at it as an international system from a big picture perspective, and how people and nations can improve cooperating with each other in the coordination and conduct of life-saving operations. This is the very essence of the aeronautical and maritime global search and rescue system in effect today. With the increase in human activity in the Arctic region now and well into the future, search and rescue is going to become an even more important issue. The sharing of information, search and rescue expertise, and the conduct of exercises to practice coordination, search and rescue skills and knowledge will continue to be essential for improving our ability to conduct Arctic life-saving operations. And search and rescue is a mission in which people and nations can really set aside their differences to save lives. And we see this happening all over the world. So in my short time here this morning, I'd like to mention 3 observations concerning search and rescue, and in particular, search and rescue in the Arctic. So first, the Coast Guard is seeing a very positive trend in the international community towards regionalization of search and rescue coordination, cooperation, and capability. In other words, nations understand that search and rescue is what I would describe as a team sport, that in many instances we just can't go it alone in meeting our maritime and aeronautical search and rescue obligations under the Maritime Search and Rescue and Chicago Conventions. For example, we're seeing this regionalization effort in the Asia-Pacific region and many areas in the Western Hemisphere and in the Caribbean, and most importantly for us today, in the Arctic region, with the Arctic Council nations leading the way in search and rescue regionalization with the negotiation and signing of the Arctic Aeronautical and Maritime Search and Rescue Agreement in 2011. While the 8 Arctic Council nations worked together to craft an agreement that would meet their specific national requirements, all understood that a regional approach to life-saving the Arctic would be beneficial for all the Arctic nations, and it has. The Arctic Search and Rescue Agreement did set basic principles for cooperation and coordination, and it also divided up the Arctic region into aeronautical and maritime search and rescue regions, listing the coordinates for each region each Arctic Council nation would be responsible for. In addition, the agreement became the impetus for Arctic Council nations to hold several search and rescue exercises, with the first being held by Canada in 2011, with the Kingdom of Denmark subsequently sponsoring additional exercises in the Greenland Sea. These search and rescue exercises and working with other national search and rescue authorities in the Arctic Council will only continue to improve coordination, cooperative relationships, and the conduct of Arctic search and rescue operations for many years to come. So second, I want to emphasize that the Arctic region is vast, as we all know, and it's this vastness that is a challenge for search and rescue authorities. While the Arctic Ocean is the smallest of the world's 5 oceans, still it's about 4.5 million square kilometers, with over 45,300 kilometers of coastline. By comparison, the Arctic Ocean is a little less than 1.5 times the size of the United States. For the U.S. Coast Guard, in particular, we're responsible for extremely large aeronautical and maritime search and rescue regions in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, which also includes a slice of the Arctic search and rescue pie as well. One important challenge the U.S. and other Arctic Council nations continually face with such large areas of search and rescue responsibility is what many call the tyranny of distance. With only limited search and rescue resources available in the enormous Arctic Ocean and land areas, in what can be extremely hazardous weather and environmental conditions, can make Arctic search and rescue operations extremely difficult and perilous. And with budgets the way they are, it's difficult to fund and maintain full-time Arctic search and rescue resources. While the tyranny of distance, environment, weather, and limited resources will always be a reality in the Arctic, the goal will be to pursue mitigating these search and rescue challenges together, now and into the future. And this is why the signing of the Arctic Search and Rescue Agreement was so important, binding the 8 Arctic Council nations, national governments in a commitment to save lives in this extremely large and challenging portion of our planet. So we need to remember something here as well. While I do speak about the Arctic Council and the 8 national governments' commitment to supporting and effectively conducting Arctic search and rescue operations, this can't be accomplished without the support of volunteers, business and industry stakeholders, non-governmental organizations, indigenous communities, local, state, regional search and rescue authorities, all working together as important members in the Arctic and international search and rescue system. So we coined the phrase in our office, all search and rescue is local, to remind us that even though we all participate in this international search and rescue system, saving lives, particularly in the Arctic, really begins with focusing on those who can best save lives closest to the scene of a distress. So third, we need to understand current as well as new emerging risks and develop search and rescue plans to respond to those risks. As I previously mentioned, in this large Arctic region, search and rescue will become even more important with the increase in human activity. Search and rescue authorities will need to identify new risks and requirements that must be considered in revision of current and development of future search and rescue plans and cooperative arrangements. So here's one planning scenario to consider for us. While many are focused on the potential and possible significant increase in using the Arctic Ocean as a maritime shipping route in the future, the U.S. Coast Guard sees a continuing increase in the number of commercial passenger aircraft flying transpolar routes every day, right now, as an important risk that needs to also be considered. This is especially important when you consider the tyranny of distance and other challenges in Arctic search and rescue operations. What if one of these passenger aircraft, which now carry up to 850 passengers at a time, were to crash or ditch in the Arctic today? Odds are that a passenger aircraft that ditches in the ocean will have more than half the passengers survive, only to possibly succumb to the extreme weather conditions here in the Arctic, if not rescued in hours, if not days. Or what if an aircraft crashes on land in the Arctic? This challenge will require the Arctic Council nations and their national governments to be prepared to work together to respond to such a disaster. This is when you begin to realize just how big the Arctic really is, and the need for continued understanding of the risks and required search and rescue planning and capabilities needed to mitigate those risks. We saw this challenge become a reality in another region of the world during the recent search for the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, which disappeared in the Indian Ocean. What if the MH370 circumstances were the same, but happened here in the Arctic region? And it doesn't have to be a disaster. Any type of search and rescue operation in the Arctic can be difficult, as we know. The tyranny of distance becomes a reality. Weather and other environmental circumstances can always hamper or delay. That's my cue, I have to leave. Hamper or delay a search and rescue response. That's why we need to work together to save lives now and into the future as well. So in wrapping up, I can say with great work has been accomplished concerning search and rescue in the Arctic. We will still have much more to do. The Arctic Council nations will need to continue to work together and in collaboration with all the other Arctic stakeholders to maintain and or improve cooperative relationships so that when a person is in distress, the Arctic community can effectively respond to save lives. I would also say that in the Arctic, the idea that using all available resources to save lives should be a rule rather than a suggestion. And it'll become even more important as human activity increases for everyone involved to know who their search and rescue partners are. Because search and rescue, when you really break it down to its most basic level, is knowing two things: who's in charge and who you can call to help save the lives of somebody in distress. Thank you.